today's talk will be in English by Veronika, a long time, well you all know her probably, long time supporter and visitor, various Python community, whatever. Today's talk will be about, well, what you would want to know as a junior if you started in IT, right? How to not get crazy. And yeah, it's yours. One more thing before you start. Sorry. You can think about your lightning talks if you'd like to do a max 5-minute lightning talk, anything Python related. Or not. Yeah, you can do it now after Veronika finishes today. Thank you, and it's yours.
Thank you. There we have the slides. Right, so just to get some idea of our audience today, how many of you consider yourself a beginner or junior? Okay. We have got quite a few hands. And how many of you are seniors but work with juniors, whether, for example, teaching or have some juniors team members? Good. So hopefully this talk will be useful for most of you, whether because you would actually utilize this information yourself when you are learning, or if you are mentoring some of your younger team members or other people. Maybe this will give you some idea what they are going through and what might be helpful to them. Some of these things, if you are a senior, are super obvious, but because they are super obvious, they are super easy to also forget about. So, a disclaimer, there's just too many things a beginner should know. IT is a very vast area. There's just too many things to learn. There's new areas of interest being created. There's new information coming in. This talk is not meant to be an intro to IT bootcamp, because we would be here forever. Instead, as Jeka mentioned, it's just a list of some things that when I was a beginner, I would really enjoy knowing instead of learning them the hard way. And I bet that some of the things I say would be pitchfork-inducing, so in case you would want to grab your pitchfork, save it after the talk and I'll be happy to have the discussion. So, with that, let's get directly to the first point, which is very related to what I just said about the IT being a large area. Be prepared to never stop learning. If you think that if you go to IT and you will learn a bunch of things and then you stop learning, you will just utilize the same information all over and again, you're in the wrong field. During one of my meetings actually this week, somebody said, when you sign up for the tech industry, you sign up for change. And I think it's very relevant. As I mentioned, new information is always coming in. Like the recent IT craze, like that wasn't here like 10 years ago. Nobody would even just like talk about IT, and now it's everywhere. So nobody remembers everything. There's too many information to learn. Be prepared to just keep learning forever if you are gonna keep in this space. And with that comes, of course, the imposter syndrome. There's too much stuff. You will always feel like you don't know enough. How many of you have already run into this during your career? Like you felt like you're not good enough for the job you're doing? That's the majority of you. How many of you have managed to overcome these feelings? Yeah, a few hands, not a lot. It's actually easier to like justify not knowing everything when you're a junior, because like you're just starting out, so like it's fine if you don't know everything. But if you're a senior, and seniors are fighting the imposter syndrome a lot as well, it's harder to you as a senior to justify that in your mind, like, hey, I should know these things. Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff. People forget, we're just human. It's totally fine that you will just like keep searching Stack Overflow and Google and who knows what else, using ChatGPT for writing your basic codes, whatever. This is a very difficult thing to go through. Avoiding the imposter syndrome is a lot about confidence and also admitting that it's fine, that you don't know everything. That's hard. It's really hard to convince your mind to like believe that it's okay, and that's why it's so hard to fight it. But let's try some things that might make it easy for you to understand. Yeah, so if you get a bug open against your code, or your team member reviews your code and finds a mistake there, it's not an attack on you as a person. The goal of those people, whether it's users or team members, is to make the project the best it's possible. And that should ideally be your goal as well, right? Make the project useful for users, make it bug-free, make it reliable, all those fancy things. Their goal is the same as yours. Make the project better. It's not against you, it's to make the project good. And if you ever feel like that's not good enough, check the Git logs. And despite the joke on the screen, it's very likely you will find a lot of bugs submitted against the seniors' code as well. So it's fine. If you are a junior and have a bug reported, it's fine. Everybody gets that. And speaking of team members, tech work is people work. There's a lot of jokes about how people who are in IT just like sit in their parents' basement and code all day and all night. Yeah, that's really not true. And especially as you grow in your career, you will have to talk to the users, talk to your manager, talk to your QA or demo counterparts, maybe mentor those junior people. There's just a lot of people work involved, and having some basic human skills will get you really far. Whoever says that IT is not about having some basic communication skills is really either lying or not in IT. You'll deal with people truly almost daily. A slightly related side note, since we are talking about people, if you are a junior, find a mentor. It's really useful to know in the beginning days of your career what steps people who in the past were in your shoes took to become better. They will likely have some specific advice for your area, and that would be really useful to help you grow faster. So far we talked a lot about the human skills and mental health, and mental health is especially very important with IT. There's a lot of jokes about people just like burning out and buying a farm and becoming just like a gardener and bakers. And there's a lot of truth in those jokes. Please don't become part of them. It's often very hard to keep either work-life balance or just like burnout, because there's just so much to learn and you need to keep pushing and pushing. You don't need to take a breath. But now let's get to a bit more technical side. And one of the faults when you are especially trying to prove yourself is being the victim of premature optimization. Sometimes when people mention premature optimization, they talk about like trying to make the code pretty and optimized and fast before you actually solve the problem. The other part of it might be prematurely thinking about potential use cases and scaling that are just completely unrealistic and not needed for years and maybe ever. Like in the example on the screen, if you are just creating a new app for your work processing event, you will likely not have to deal with the problems you make up. Don't create extra problems that you don't need to solve. And similarly to not wasting time by trying to fix non-existent problems, don't also waste the time by trying to get the problem to match the solution you want to use. Again, there's just like so much things out there You will never keep learning. You never stop learning. And it's really tempting to use the shiny new tool for everything you're doing. Rewrite everything in new shiny language. Use this framework, that framework. Use, I don't know, Kubernetes on your washing machine. Most likely, this solution you are so much a fan of is not going to be suitable for the problem you have. Try to fix the problem instead of changing the problem to map it to the solution you want to use. Oftentimes, when you try to do this, you will find out that there's a lot of edge cases you need to handle that that fancy tool is not using, or there's some more stuff that you forgot about, or the language is too new and doesn't even have helpful libraries you need. You can create more problems than actually fixing your solution. With Python, we actually often see that with things like iter tools and collections, which, like, when a beginner first learns about these modules, you are like, yes, they are cool, I want to use them everywhere. And you are right, they are cool. But it's very likely that the problem you have is not going to be a textbook problem that can be solved by them. So first think about fixing the actual problem, and then if you see like, hey, it's somewhat similar, then try to use those modules or any other tool you are so much a fan of. And this is something that people will grab pitchforks, but don't take shortcuts. Implement the fix properly instead of adding a half-assed workaround. Use proper documentation. Write useful commit messages where you explain why the change is needed. Write tests. And if you are just starting, and especially if you have a baby pet project or if you have a new project, that it's likely those things will grow. If you go into a corporate job, you will likely find how these kinds of projects grew and became an absolutely awful spaghetti monsters with 10 heads, and everybody's just like afraid to touch that kind of legacy code. If you have good tests, if you have documentation, even a new junior team member can just like come in and do the change. And if you run those tests, you will see, hey, is this change working? Is it not working? Where's the problem? I can fix that. It makes dealing with these kinds of code bases much easier. And the earlier you learn these kinds of good habits, the better for you. Because it's really hard to add all of these things into that kind of messy, convoluted code base. So, what are the right tools to use for all of those things that I mentioned? And the answer is, it depends. That's something that you should keep in mind for everything else in IT. There's no one cookie cutter answer that solves all the problems. Even if you have the same problem that somebody else had, you likely will have a slightly different set of requirements, or users and their requirements, than the other person had. So you can't really use the same solution in the same way. So you need to keep your requirements in mind first, and not rely on the fact that somebody else solved the same problem in a specific way. It might be helpful for an inspiration, but it's very unlikely you can just copy-paste that part. Right. Back to the Pythonic stuff. If you're not aware of Zen of Python as the beginner, suggest you check it out. It has a lot of information about good coding habits and standards. I do want to point out that I hope it's here. Yeah, it's behind me. The error should never pass silently. This is just the extra because the whole text doesn't fit on the slide in a readable way. But the errors one, that one is really important. You would not believe how many senior people will just be on a demo like, oh yeah, this is throwing errors, just ignore that. Yeah, don't ignore that. It will cause you issues. So this was obviously written with Python in mind, but the advice that's in there is something that is very language agnostic, so wherever you end, just, I don't know, print this, put it on top of your monitor. It will be a good reminder, refresher for some good coding standards to keep in mind and hold. And that more or less brings us to the stuff that I wanted to talk about. There's, as I mentioned, a lot of other things. We can of course go into a lot of details about each of the steps, but I'm leaving that to you in case you have any questions. But hopefully these things will help you out if you are starting in some kind of new job, for example, if you're just learning. When you get thrown into deep water with some kind of large project you wouldn't know even where to start, these steps would hopefully help you figure out, okay, yeah, I can do this, I can ignore these things, and your path would be hopefully a bit clearer. And if you are mentoring any kind of junior people, remind them of these things. There's a lot of stuff that is mentioned maybe at the beginning of some courses and then never mentioned again and thus forgotten. And it's important to keep that in mind. And with that, I'll leave it to the questions. And I'll leave here, this slide here just in case.
We need to ask, you kind of touched it, but in terms of the imposter syndrome, anything else that comes to your mind in terms of how to fight it? Is it about like getting, you mentioned getting confidence, right? But is it by...
that's a very generic thing, unfortunately.
Is it by like learning more and feeling more knowledgeable, more senior and building confidence by that, or any other advice?
That can help, but don't overdo it, you'll burn out. It's more about being comfortable with your situation. That you will never know everything. It's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. As I had the example there, check out that seniors make mistakes too. So it's totally fine for you to make them as well.
Okay.
Of course, if anybody has other advice, then just like get a therapist to gain confidence and be okay with the fact that others make mistakes. Then yes.
Yeah, another aspect is don't compare yourself to others too much. Like,
That's
take it lightly.
That's a great advice in general.
It can sink you real fast.
Yeah, compare, if you want to compare yourself to somebody, compare it to yourself in the past when you were even more junior and just starting out and barely knew how to open the Python command line. You're better now, you can become better later as well. Okay, no pitchfork so far.
I remember one of your writing talk on DEFCON the last year, and it was basically just one sentence: please don't write crappy code.
A lot of the stuff can be
so, I just would like to ask, like, where is the border between learning stuff and trying to, bring some like new ideas and writing the crappy code?
You can bring good ideas and good code in a timely manner. Like I mentioned, like learning good habits early. If you start a new project, keeping those things in mind and doing them immediately, they will become automatic too. A lot of the stuff can be automated these days, like creation of some kind of project structure with like documentation, testing structure and everything. So if you learn to use those tools, all of the like project management surrounding stuff will be done for you, and you can just like start writing the main function. So it's possible to make a compromise between the two without losing a lot of time. Yes.
Maybe I would add one thing. Don't overanalyze.
Easy to say. Right?
Yes, a lot of these things are easier to say than to actually
Yeah.
do them.
Yeah, my point is like all of those things, like not writing crappy code and keeping things simple and making things right and all that, like that's easy to say when you are already aware of what the right way is. If you're not, well, you can focus too much on trying to do that and too little on actual writing, which will result in you submitting your first very well thought out, well tested, and unfortunately completely useless patch because it will get destroyed in review the moment you push it. So sooner or later someone will find something. If you're in a junior position, even if you are trying very hard, it's very probably your first patch is going to be judged as not worth it. So
Depends
Yeah.
on the project, depends on the team communication.
yeah, the point
You can
is like
be a senior and this can happen to you as well.
yeah, but the point is like if you invest so much time into it, it's gonna feel so much worse.
Yes.
If you spend a week thinking about it, then push it, and someone will criticize it and say, okay, this is not gonna work because of this and this and this. It's gonna feel so much worse than if you have pushed it on the day one.
Yeah, and that actually brings us back to the team communication slide, right? Like you are on a team with people, they will likely review that code, ping them on your company IRC or Slack or whatever you're using. Hey, I have this idea to fix this bug. Would it work? Do you see any massive problems with that? If they like the idea, it's likely that the patch review will just be a formality to catch some corner cases or still stick useless things. Well.
Anyone else? Last questions, maybe? Okay, thanks you
Yeah.
once again.
Yeah,
Ah,
sorry. I was deep in thought. So you talked about tips, but in my experience, a lot of bad thoughts or sadness comes from expectations that are not met. Usually, when you are jumping from junior to senior positions, and as a junior, you have some expectations how your work will look when you are a senior. And then they are not met. Like when I will be senior, I will know everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it doesn't
not correct.
happen.
Or I will only do the funny stuff like setting up new projects and working on a greenfield and so on. So do you have any experience with this topic?
I once, a long time ago, saw a tweet that was like, oh, principal software engineers, they just I don't know, meet with the president and CTO and just do all the fancy stuff. And the reality is that they are the janitor that's cleaning your tray. Chances are, the more senior you become, you will be working in more abstract areas, like deciding the project guidance and things like that. And won't be actually dealing with much code anymore. So anytime you will have time to do coding, it will be small things that are not emergency. Maybe stuff that the legacy monster is, and nobody on the team wants to touch it anymore, so you're just like, yeah, well, if I do a rework in 2 months, it's fine. So that's my experience with going more senior direction. If you have any questions about becoming more senior, what that would entail, talk to your manager or team leads whose positions you will be taking over. Knowing what to expect in those roles is really helpful, then you won't set expectations that wouldn't be met, because if you take over somebody's position, like a team lead for example, or a more senior QE, the people who are already on those positions, they are living those things, right? So they can describe to you how their work day looks like, what they are dealing with, and then you will know what you're getting into.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, maybe just a caveat, I had a different experience when I joined the new company, and it was exactly the other way around. So as a senior, you are doing always emergencies. You are always fixing the stuff, which is like burning and needs to be finished by the end of the week, tomorrow, in 1 hour, whatever. So yeah, just
Yeah,
a
everybody's
different
experience is different, of course. Like, that's also why I didn't mention a lot of specifics when it comes to, like, for example, tooling. And, like, it really depends on your specific team and the team culture, company culture. There's just too much difference. It's like, hopefully you knew what you're getting into.
yeah, I hope.
I wish.
Alright, if anybody else has any other topics, then we can discuss them later. Thank you.